Good afternoon. Okay, I guess they're waiting for me. Good afternoon and welcome to the Public Health and Safety Committee for June, or excuse me, I'm looking at something, July 20th at 3 o'clock. I'm the chair, and Councilwoman Ortiz, I represent District 3.
Mike Padilla, I'm council representing District 5.
Sandra Clear, District 2.
And at the table, if you'll recognize yourself.
I'm Luther Gagne. I'm the legal advisor for the police department.
And Lisa Robertson, City Attorney.
Thank you. That's the first order of business. We welcome you. Second order of business is approval of the June 15th meeting.
Move to approve.
It's been moved to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, and that's unanimously. Okay. Next order of business, reports from previous committee meetings regarding camping on public and private property. I don't understand what that is. Do we know? Reports from previous committee.
Would that be from staff?
Oh,
I
that's what
think
I'm
it's what you
wondering.
asked them to do.
Okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to change up our agenda just a second. Luther has a video that he wants to show us, and we want to see it. So Luther, go ahead. You're on next. I'd also like to say, if you have not signed the sign-in sheet, if you please do so. That helps our secretary, and it also helps me know who's here, and we can get in touch with you, okay, if we need to. I really don't like the podium there, because I can't see back there. Okay, Luther?
Thank you. What I would like to just spend a couple of minutes talking about, and then I'll start the video here, is how we got to where we're at with this ordinance. Legal was asked to look at some options, and what we did was look at many cities around the country and on the issue of homelessness and what those cities are doing. Some cities are successful, some are not so successful. We did a lot of legal research. This is an area that there's been a lot of litigation over, and a lot of cities have seen their ordinances invalidated based as an outcome of that litigation. What you have before you for your consideration is kind of the product of all of that research. We've come up with an ordinance that we think is up to date and current with legal precedent and best practices. And it does a couple of things. There's some kind of critical pieces to this ordinance that need to be there. The ordinance does not criminalize homelessness. I think that's a very important point. It's not doesn't attempt to criminalize homelessness. It's actually the opposite of that. The intent of this ordinance is to address homelessness and try to help. And the way it goes about that is having an enforcement mechanism, but then placing a limitation on when that enforcement can occur. And that's where the help comes in, that limitation. Because in order to enforce the ordinance, the city has to do certain things first. One of the things that some cities that have been successful with this program like to say is it's 3 different categories, 3 E's. You have to educate, encourage, and then enforce. You have to educate people on services and programs that are available. You have to encourage them to accept them, help them get them into those programs. And then the last piece of it, when all of those options fail and the person is refusing to leave and persisting on camping on public property or private property or whatever, then finally at the end you have the enforcement mechanism. It doesn't end there though. Even once the ordinance is enforced, you still have other options. At that point, the enforcement is just when the person enters the criminal justice system. You had things like drug court, mental health court, diversion programs through a prosecutor's office. All of those mechanisms can also be a bridge to services to assist the person. And that's generally the idea, is what this ordinance does, it's the vehicle to make those services available, because having the city be required to do these things, well, it does a couple of things. One of the things we're looking at is creating a homeless outreach team within the police department. And that's a very specific thing that we found in our research, because before you can enforce an ordinance, you have to have gone through these efforts to educate and encourage. And we have to document those. Well, typically that's going to be a police officer in the field writing reports, doing field notes about the efforts that they've made, contacting the homeless person to offer these services. So the homeless outreach team within the police department is one of those options that comes from this. And there are other options that you need in order to make it work. Shelter space is a big one. You have to have, obviously, you have to have a bed available to offer the person that is maybe sleeping in public. If you don't have the bed available, then you can't enforce the ordinance. That's something this community needs to look at a little bit. We have a shelter, but there are going to be situations arise where that shelter may not be able to have a bed available for the person that we have, whether they're intoxicated, drugs or alcohol or something like that. Some communities find themselves needing to create what's called a wet shelter space for somebody that's intoxicated, just so they can have a bed for the night. Another program a lot of communities use is a work program. Sometimes you hear about it in terms of panhandling, but it also works for homeless in camping situations. It's a program that's what this video is about, and it's pretty self-explanatory, so I'll just play the video.
Is it going to play just up here or on both?
It plays on here.
So raise your hand if you've seen somebody in your city standing on a corner holding a sign like this. I think we all have. If you're being honest, at least one time have you wondered if they mean it? If we offered them a job, would they really take it? And what would that job mean to them in their lives? Well, this is a story about what happened in my city when we decided to find out. When we decided to think differently about panhandling and lift people up through the dignity of work. We call it There's a Better Way. We call it There's a Better Way because I believe there's a better way to get the money you need than panhandling on a corner. I believe there's a better way to help your brothers and sisters in need than handing a few dollars out the car window. We know there's dignity in work. We also know that people are much more likely to invest in themselves if they believe that their community is willing to invest in them first. And because we're all wired to be kind and compassionate, it always feels good to hand a couple of dollars to someone that is in need. But if you talk to panhandlers, many of them will tell you that your few dollars don't necessarily go towards feeding the body, they go towards feeding an addiction. There's a better way. My name is Richard Berry, and I have one of the best jobs in the world. I get to be the mayor of a great American city, Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I was at lunch on July 17th, 2015 in my great American city. Then on my way back to City Hall, I saw this gentleman standing on a corner. And as you can see, he's holding a sign. And his sign says he wants a job. But if you look closer at the picture, you'll see he's standing underneath a blue sign. And that sign says, if you need help, if you need food or shelter, or you would like to donate, please call 311, our community service number. So why is this guy standing underneath my sign with his sign? Well, we wondered if anybody would call that 311 sign. As it turns out, they did. 11,000 times people called. I put those up at about 30 intersections. And we did connect them with food and shelter and services. But yet he's still standing under my sign with a sign that says he wants a job. It's simple, he wants a job. So I decided to do something rare in government. I decided to make the solution simpler rather than more complicated. I went back to my office, I gathered my staff around, and I said, we're going to take this man at his word and others like him. The man says he wants a job, we're going to give him a job, and we're going to make our city an even better place in the meantime. You see, Albuquerque is a beautiful place. We're a mile high, the Sandia Mountains on the east, the Rio Grande runs through the center of our city. We're the home of the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta. On a day like today, you could literally ski this morning and golf this afternoon. But there's always something to do, always weeds to pull, litter to pick up. So if you're going to have an initiative like this in your city, you have to ask yourself two questions. First one is there anything left to do in your city? Then if the answer is no, would you please give me your mayor's phone number, because I need some advice. But the second question you have to ask is this: are your solutions to panhandling working? If you're like Albuquerque and you're taking the punitive approach, like we used to, handing out tickets to panhandlers or those who give them money, I'm going to suggest that your solutions aren't working. And I know you're not getting to the root of the problem in your city. So if you have something to do, you need people that need something to do, there's a better way. And the good news is, it's not that complicated. This is a 2006 Dodge van. It was in my motor pool, not doing anything. We put some new tires on it, wrapped it with the logo. This van now goes out to street corners where our panhandlers are. We go to them. We stop the van, we get out, we ask them if they would like a day's work rather than panhandling for the day. And if you wonder if they really mean it, it takes us about an hour to fill this van up in the morning because almost everybody we ask takes a job for the day. But you need more than just a van. You need a super fantastic human being to drive that van. And my super fantastic human being, his name is Will. This is him in the yellow vest. Will works with our local nonprofit partner. He works with the homeless every day. The panhandlers trust him. He believes in them. He hustles. I like to say, where there's a will, there's a way. So if you're going to do the Better Way campaign in your city, you need to find yourself a Will. Because he's really one of the keys to making this successful in the city of Albuquerque. You also need a great nonprofit partner, and ours is St. Martin's Hospitality Center. They've been in our community for over 30 years. They provide counseling, food, shelter, and if they don't provide it, they know somebody in our city that does. But they do something much more for me as the mayor. They provide agility. You see, it takes me 2 weeks, maybe 2 months sometimes, to onboard an employee with the city of Albuquerque. So you can imagine my old Dodge van, my super fantastic human being Will, my great local nonprofit partner, they drive to the corner, there's a panhandler, they say, would you like to work for the day? The panhandler says yes, when Will says, great, I'll be back in 6 weeks to pick you up. It wouldn't work. It's really important that we have that agility in our program. And they do the paperwork, they do the insurance, they do all of the other forms that I can't do quickly. We pay our panhandlers $9 an hour. We feed them lunch at the job site. At the end of the day, our old Dodge van takes them right back to St. Martin's, and they get connected with counseling services. So far, with the pilot program in a couple days a week, and a fantastic human being in a Dodge van, we cleaned up 400 city blocks in the city of Albuquerque. We picked up over 117,000 pounds of trash, weeds, and litter. And I don't know if you've ever weighed a tumbleweed, but they don't weigh much. So you can imagine the volume of material that we've picked up. So my city has 6,000 employees, and none better than my solid waste department. We send our trucks out at the end of the day. They help the panhandlers put into the truck the material that they picked up during the day, and we take it to the landfill. I'm lucky that I have city employees that are willing to work side by side with our panhandlers. They're lifting up our city while lifting up their lives. And like anything else, listen, it takes resources. But the good news is, it doesn't take much. We started with an old van, a super fantastic human being, a great local nonprofit, and $50,000. But we also had to have community trust. And fortunately, we had built that up in years prior to Better Way. We have a program called Albuquerque Heading Home, a housing first model where we house the chronically homeless. And when I told my community we wanted to do that differently, I said there's a smart way to do the right thing. We have now housed 650 chronically homeless, medically vulnerable, frankly most likely to die in the streets in our city. We commissioned our university, they studied it. We can tell the taxpayers we can save you 31.6% over the cost of leaving someone to struggle for survival on the streets. We've now saved over $5 million while housing 650 people. So we had that community trust, but we had to have a little bit more of an honest conversation also as a community. Because we had to get people to understand that when they hand those $5 out the window, they might actually be minimizing their opportunity to help the person in need. And here's why. That $5 might go to buying some fast food today. A lot of times it goes to buying drugs and alcohol. That same $5, if you gave it to one of our shelters, could feed 7 people today. And if you gave it to one of our local food banks or food pantries, we could actually feed 20 people with that money. People ask, well, Albuquerque's 600,000 people, million metro. This wouldn't work in our city. We're too big, we're too small. I disagree. If you have one panhandler in one city block, you could do this. If you live in a city of 8.5 million people, you can do this. And it doesn't matter what you do. It's not the work that you do, it's the dignity of the work. You can do anything. So I think any city could do this. And people say to me, Mayor, that's just a little too simple. You know, it can't work that way. But I'll tell you what, friends, when you go to a street corner and you engage with a panhandler with dignity and respect, maybe for the first time in years, maybe in their life, and you tell them that you believe in them and that this is their city as much as it's your city, and that you actually need their help to make our place better, and that you understand that this isn't the answer to all their problems, but at least it's a start, an amazing thing happens. And when they get out on the job site and they start working together, you start seeing amazing things happen. They see teamwork. They see the fact that they can make a difference. And at the end of the day, when they get back to St. Martin's in that old Dodge van, they're much more likely to sign up for whatever services they need. Substance abuse, mental health counseling, you name it. So far, with our pilot program, we've offered about 1,700 days of day work. We've connected 216 people to permanent employment opportunities. 20 people actually qualified for our Housing First model, heading home, and they've been housed. And over 150 people have been connected to mental health, substance abuse services through There's a Better Way. But this is me, just 2 weeks ago, at St. Martin's, doing our point in time survey that we do every 2 years. And I'm interviewing a gentleman who's homeless, like we do, getting his information, figuring out where he's from, how he got there, what we can do to help him. And he knows he's holding the same sign that the guy was holding in 2015. Same sign I walked out with here today. So you have to ask yourself, is he really making a difference? Absolutely, it's making a difference. Albuquerque is now one of the national leaders in combating some of the most stubborn and persistent social issues that we have. Combined with Albuquerque Heading Home, the Better Way program, Albuquerque has reduced unsheltered homelessness in our city by 80% last year. Since I took over as mayor, we've been able to reduce the chronic homeless population in our city by 40%. And by HUD's definition, we've gotten to functional zero, which means we've literally ended veterans' homelessness in the city of Albuquerque by being intentional. So I'm happy to report that other cities are hearing about this. Other mayors are calling us. Chicago, Seattle, Denver, Dallas are now starting to implement programs where they bring the dignity of work to the equation. And I can't wait to learn from them. I can't wait to see what their experiment looks like, what their pilot project looks like, so we can start taking a collective approach nationally to the dignity of work. And I want to commend them, the mayors, their communities, their nonprofits for the work that they're doing. So who's next? Are you in your city ready to step up? Are you ready to think differently about these persistent social issues? Are you ready to lift people up in your community through the dignity of work and make your city profoundly better in many ways? Well, if you are, my friends, I promise you there is a better way. Thank you.
They'll start to see how I could.
I know that video was talking about panhandling, but the reason why I wanted to show it to you and why I think it's important for you to consider is our ordinance on this camping requires programs and services to be in place before it can be enforced. Last summer, one of our police officers, a CIT officer, took me out around the city on a tour looking at homeless places where the homeless are sleeping. One of those places was out on Wanamaker, and what I found out just by looking was the people that are panhandling are oftentimes the people that are camping too. He had a sign, I don't mean this to be cheesy, but this was found at a homeless campsite out on Wanamaker, and it was also there with a lot of other cardboard, but the person was sleeping under a tree. And at night, they would camp there. During the day, they would go out and hold this sign and panhandle. So the video is talking about panhandling, but the program will work for both.
Okay, I think that's great. Is that all you had, Luther?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what I'm understanding is, before we can pass the ordinance, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, we need to put these things in place, is that correct? Certain things in place, like the shelter, the outreach shelter, and then the, did we have a unit with the police officer, or the outreach program yet? Has that been established?
It's still, it's still in the planning stages. It
Okay.
won't take much longer to implement with the
Okay.
chief's approval, but it's not operational
Okay,
yet.
so that's in the planning, but these are the steps, right, that we have to have before we can pass the ordinance, is that correct? Okay, so when I look at the enforcement part of it, that's in planning stages. Okay. The shelter, I know we had talked about, at our last meeting, we had talked about the mission, and I know there was somebody here from the mission, you're here from the mission today, okay? Was there any type of discussion regarding this ordinance, or are you just coming to listen, or if you could state your name when you get to the podium and who you represent?
Sure,
Would
Frank
you be-
Henderson, I oversee homeless services at Topeka Rescue Mission. We wanted to hear what was being said.
Okay.
And recognize that we're able to play a part in it because we do have a street reach team that goes out and reaches the unsheltered homeless, and we're certainly willing to partner with the city. In terms of the proposal that's being done in other cities, if this was something that Topeka determined that they want to do, we again would be willing to partner with you. We would be able to send a staff person out in the van with city staff if city was administering this program. We'd be able to provide sack lunches for those individuals as well.
Now, Frank, are you aware what we're looking for in this ordinance, that we have to provide, we have to offer them when if we were to pass this ordinance, we have to offer them a place for that night to stay. And we did have a discussion with the mission and their rules and regulations. So do you realize, if you guys are going to be a partner with that, that might be a barrier because of if this person's drunk or... So I guess what we're doing is trying to get several locations to be shelter, is that correct? But are you aware of?
I'm fully aware of that. We are not what is described as a public shelter.
Right.
Okay? And we're happy to take those individuals that meet our admission requirements. You know, if someone is under the influence or is intoxicated, we would not be able to shelter those.
So you would be happy to be a partner as long as they meet your requirements?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And we can ask for more than
Yes.
that. Okay, so I'm going to write down the mission, okay, maybe a partner.
And in addition, of course, we are willing to provide programming for those that are willing to be involved in the programming we offer. So,
Okay.
thank you.
You look good in street clothes, Frank. Okay, yes.
This plan, the HWPS plan, is something we can do in addition to the ordinance, right? This does not, this helps the ordinance, but this isn't something we have to do right now. Is that correct? I mean, this is a plan that could be down the road.
Well,
Or Frank, do you know, because this is from Barry Feeker, is that right? So you guys have this plan in place already?
Are you speaking of the proposal in terms of the work program? No, that is not a plan that is in place.
Okay,
That was a response that we have put together as an idea that could possibly work for the city of Topeka.
oh, okay.
Yes.
This entire plan, Councilmember, does not have to be in place. It was proposed by Reverend Feeker as maybe something
Right.
that would assist. There are just certain elements that have to be met in order
Right.
for the ordinance to work.
Okay.
But this entire plan does
Okay,
not have to
good.
be in place.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
So this was just a plan given to us? Okay, okay.
Absolutely.
But it is what it is, just a plan? Okay, all right. All right, where is, I seen her back there. Corey, can you come to the podium? What's going on with the homeless task force? You were we were waiting on the meeting.
Yes.
We wanted to involve you guys because you guys have been meeting, the task force has been meeting
Yes.
for several years, I believe.
Yes.
So where are we at there?
Okay, so we had a couple meetings with homeless task force members, and the chair couldn't make it today of the homeless task force, but the vice chair is here today, and she will present what the members came up with
Okay,
as a response.
okay. Vice Chair, welcome. Please state your name and who you're representing.
My name's Carrie Allen, and I am here presenting on behalf of the Homeless Task Force as the Vice Chair. And we have a letter that we would like to read to you today. The Homeless Task Force is an advocacy, information sharing, coordination, and program development organization devoted to preventing and solving homelessness in Shawnee County. Members of the Homeless Task Force come from a variety of agencies, including publicly funded institutions such as healthcare facilities, mental health facilities, foster care, and other youth facilities. It also includes civic leaders and other public and private agencies that address housing, health, social service, victim service, employment, and education. On behalf of the Homeless Task Force membership, please accept this letter and our recommendations to delay consideration of the proposed ordinance prohibiting camping on public and private property. On July 18th, 2018, members of the Homeless Task Force voted and agreed that our city will benefit from additional considerations and planning before camping prohibition ordinance is created.
Carrie?
Yes.
You don't have 4 minutes. You got as much time as you want. Slow down
Okay.
just a little bit for me.
The Homeless Task Force concerns include other cities have encountered constitutional protection difficulties with similar laws. Before an ordinance is created, the Homeless Task Force would like to work with the committee in developing assurances that Topeka and those who live here will not face civil right complications. Citywide, our data regarding affordable housing needs and problems is outdated and somewhat incomplete. The Homeless Task Force wants to partner with the committee in securing additional data that will allow us to craft more successful public policy. Providers of services and supports to the area's homeless population have expressed a variety of concerns regarding the feasibility of enforcing and effectively funding the ordinance as it is currently proposed. The task force would appreciate the opportunity to work through the feasibility issues with the committee, ensuring our community is properly equipped to maximize the benefits that might result if an anti-camping ordinance becomes law. The Homeless Task Force encourages the esteemed members of the committee to develop a working group that includes any interested members of the task force, as well as other stakeholders, to over the course of the next 3 months, share information and concerns, and as a team, craft a proposed set of ideas for mitigating the issues of homeless individuals sleeping outside of shelters. Homelessness is not a crime. People experiencing homelessness should not be criminalized. At the same time, the needs of property owners and others concerned with homeless individuals making use of public and private properties deserves due consideration. The causes of homelessness are varied. Some homeless individuals have serious and persistent physical or behavioral health conditions that neither they nor the communities in which they live have sufficient resources to accommodate. Other individuals are homeless because of circumstances beyond their control. They're victims of domestic violence and trafficking, or youth who are separated from their families. Issues the Homeless Task Force foresees working with the committee to more fully explore are: how are homeless individuals who are suspected of being in violation of the ordinance going to prove on the spot to an officer why they cannot go to the mission? Will we require people to carry and produce documentation of their disabilities, deeply held beliefs, phobias, and/or official bar status in order to avoid jail? How might the mission handle an increase in guests who, knowing that they must prove that they can't stay there, participate in behaviors that result in an intentional barred status? Legal precedents on issues such as this seems to direct that individuals must not be forced into therapeutic treatment. Current protocols at the Topeka Rescue Mission may result in some individuals being required to participate in therapy, treatment, education, classes, medical treatment, and/or other types of support in order to reside there. What will Topeka do to ensure that civil rights protections are being upheld under the possible anti-camping ordinance? How will the city accommodate people being released from the hospital with an illness that makes them physically unable to stay at the mission? What additional unfunded burdens are we creating on our local hospitals? Where in the ordinance is the detailed required assurance that places for individuals who want and need to camp will be made available? Considering the $100 to $300 cost of detaining an individual in city jails, cells, and the additional financial burdens that will come with effectively and uniformly enforcing an anti-camping ordinance, what additional resources will be allocated to accommodate the ordinance? And are there more cost-effective ways to address the city's homeless population? In summary, while we understand the need to keep the community clean and healthy, we feel the solution deserves a well-rounded and thought-out response. The Homeless Task Force respectively requests to be included in assisting the committee and our city in developing appropriate solutions. Our community prides itself on being compassionate and providing services to help people advance. If provided the opportunity by your decision today, the Homeless Task Force is prepared to help the City Council develop well-informed, legal, and humanistic solutions.
Well, we thank you for that. I'd like a copy of your
Yes.
letter, please, to give to, oh, sorry. You're going to give us all one? Yep. Okay. I'll make sure you get one, Liz. Sure, sure.
That is the list of everyone that is on the Homeless Task Force.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay,
Questions?
Councilwoman Clear.
How long did you say this organization's been around, or this task force?
Long time. Years?
So my question is, why haven't you done this already? Why are we just now getting concerned and want to work and figure this out?
On dealing with homelessness, it's something that we've been working on, and there's no easy solution. There's a lack of affordable housing.
So what have you done to address some of your concerns in here in all these years about camping?
Have we addressed anything? Street outreach? Do you want to?
Councilmember Clear, I believe that one of the things that we do with the continuum of care and our agencies that are in there is we do a lot of street outreach. We've been doing street outreach for quite some time with our various partners. And so, as you know, it's not an easy solution, otherwise we wouldn't have homelessness anywhere in the United States.
Well, but you're talking about homelessness, and I'm kind of talking about camping, and sometimes they
Right.
camp just because they want to, not because they're homeless. So I guess my question is, did you just all of a sudden get interested when there was going to be a camping ordinance, and you said, oh no, we can't do this, or why haven't you figured, I guess, some of this out before?
Well, I think that, even what Luther presented here today with the TED Talk, everything revolves around money and the money that you need in order to effectively do something. And so a lot of our problems with the Homeless Task Force is that everybody is limited on money and they can only do what they can do. We do have a need for a wet shelter, as Luther mentioned. we don't have the money for it, and we don't have an agency that's willing to take on that role. But that's always been something that we know for sure that we need. So those are the types of conversations that we want to have with the committee before this would go any further, because we just feel that we have to get the right support services in place before we would do such an ordinance.
Okay, thank you. And I have one more question for Doug. Can I have him? For who? Doug Gerber.
Sure. Mr. Gerber, hold tight, Corey.
Yeah, I have a question.
She has a question for you. Go. Okay, hold on. Let's go ahead with your question.
Yeah, as long as she's at the
Oh, sure.
podium,
Okay.
please. Okay, thank you, Corey.
Yes.
A couple questions. Let me ask the question in another way about your work over the last X amount of years. What have you determined works best for your experience over these years in trying to either help or reduce the need for homelessness? I mean, after all those years, I'm sure that you've developed an idea of, rather than trying this, we've tried it over and over, that doesn't work. So what's your best solution to this point for addressing this issue?
Well, I think if you ask the rescue mission or any of the outreach teams, you would get an answer of you have to reach out to people like 80 times before they might take a bite of the services that you're offering. And we've learned that. And so these outreach teams that are repeatedly going out to these campsites, sometimes they can get people to participate in those services and sometimes you can't. And we just need to keep being diligent about doing that. The Homeless Task Force is responsible to bringing $2 million into the city every year with the Shelter Plus Care program, which is $1.6 million for people with disabilities and are homeless. We have many people that come onto that program that are street homeless, so they're camping either in their car or in a tent. And then we have the Tanglewood Community Actions program that also houses people that are homeless with support services. So we do a lot. There's more that needs to be done. We just want to make sure that everyone's getting the services that they need before we do this.
Okay, and I think I've heard that before about the repetition of
Yes.
contact before they'll see the opportunity.
Right.
But with that many contacts that you make, is that saying that this population is not transitory, that it's here? I mean, they're not here for a short time and then move on, because if they did, you wouldn't have the opportunity to contact them that many times. So is it not transitory then? It's more a permanent population of homeless people?
I think it's both. I think it's both.
Okay. And is not Vallejo considering utilizing a wet shelter? I was trying to remember, I thought I heard Bill Persinger say something about that they had thought about having that facility available. Is that something that's just still in the talking stages, or
I have not.
did I misunderstand?
Yeah, I have not heard that, so
Okay.
I apologize. Yeah,
Okay.
I haven't heard
No
that.
problem.
Yeah.
All right. I was just curious, like Councilwoman Clear, certainly it's a problem that has existed
Sure.
and will continue to exist no matter what we do. But I would think over that period of time, we would have developed some best practices or at least some key things that we could utilize in trying to move forward with a solution, because I just don't want to keep going over and over and over and not really gain any ground. And I appreciate the work that you've been doing, because I know it's a challenge. The other thing that I'm kind of concerned about, and I haven't had a chance yet to ask the lieutenant here today, about the police department's resources that they'll contribute to the effort, because if you don't have a team that can respond quickly, what's going to happen, in my understanding, from my experience, is that police officers are going to get tied up. And the few of the officers that we have, we're down 47 people.
Right.
47 officers. The officers that we have available to get tied up on a good project or something needs to be done, but we need them in other capacities as well. So if we have a team in place, it's got to be very well established. There's got to be quick response. There's got to be all those things that we talk about, they have to mesh really well, I think.
Right.
And as I understand from what City Attorney said, we don't have to have all that in place in order to pass this ordinance. But there's no point in passing it if we don't have all the tools ready. We'll just pass it and then just stand still for a while. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Well, and Corey, you guys go out and do the count, right?
We do.
And that's to get federal funding in.
Yeah, and I noticed in the TED Talk that I was like, wow, how did they get the homeless
Right.
population? I mean, that's pretty impressive. Our
Because that's mandated.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Uh-huh.
And we do ours annually because we get more points on our continuum of care
Right.
application. So we do it every year.
Right.
Over the past several years, those numbers really haven't fluctuated too
Right.
much on the point in time count. We count the guests at the rescue mission, and we also go out to the campsites to count the street homeless as well. So,
Right.
but those numbers haven't changed too much over the years.
What I like about, I was a part of this, I see they took my name off, which is fine. But what I like about this, and if you haven't been, you should go, this was an eye-opener to me. You know, you have people that come and present, and when they come and present, they come and present what their organization can do for the homeless or what they can offer to the table. And it's very rewarding because a lot of it you don't really know until you sit down with them. Example, do you know what 501 can do?
No.
Do you know what 501 can do?
Educate kids.
No, we have homeless kids.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
We have homeless seniors. We have homeless high schoolers, and that's what I'm saying is an eye opener to some of their stuff. But again, I understand the funding is so low, but it was very educational to me to see who was mentally able to provide and who was, not physically, but, food-wise, who was able to provide, and just the parts that they play. And when I look at this, it seems like, again, we have so many entities, but nobody's really tied them in. And so I think this ordinance is good, that maybe we can have that talk. Because, you talked about the officers and their immediate response. I know Salvation Army has somebody on call, and that's what they do. You can call him, and I don't think he's an officer, but he's dedicated to going to talk to them, to get them off the street or to feed them, and so that was good. So I'm glad to see the list. I wanted to talk about something that after our last meeting, somebody came up to me and said there was a guy that was being released from the hospital that was homeless. Can you talk a little bit about that, Corey?
Sure. That gentleman was being released from the hospital. He was significantly ill and had a lot of barriers. He also had a small therapy dog with him, which he was certainly not going to part with. And if you're a dog lover like me, you can kind of understand that. He was living in his car. We tried to get him on Shelter Plus Care. However, his mental disability didn't allow him to finish that application process. So he is right now elderly, living in his car.
So the question was asked if we would pass this ordinance and nobody would take him. Let's say the mission couldn't take him because of his because of how he was. And I know Barry has told me there's a lot of nursing homes that are asking for you to take, because you don't have those facilities to accommodate. So you couldn't accommodate this gentleman. So if we passed the ordinance and we couldn't accommodate him here, and he couldn't be accommodated here, and he couldn't be accommodated here, then he would be arrested. Is that correct? Because that was a concern.
No, if the ordinance requires that a couple of things, that they have to have shelter space available and refuse it, and they also have to not be in need of medical or other social services. If he's in need and we don't have any place to put him or a service to be able to get him into to address his need, then we wouldn't be able to enforce it against him.
So he could be out there he could camp out there. He could stay out there camping.
Well, he might camp, but what the ordinance is going to do, though, is with the creation of this homeless outreach team in the police department and the requirement that we document our efforts, is we're going to be out there talking to him with a police officer, documenting those efforts to get him into services, and there's a good possibility we might find some place for him to get into versus just leaving him on his own.
Well, and I don't know if we're doing that now, because I think our team does a pretty good job of going whenever you guys get somebody turned in, don't you? Go and check on them or try to talk to them. Is anybody here from Salvation Army or that team with the task force? No? Don't they do that already?
I'm not for sure the specifics of their outreach team on what they do. I'm more familiar with
Because I know I've
Valeo's
given,
outreach team.
and I can't think of his name, I've given a couple names to them, and they'll go get them right away.
Yeah, they will.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, that was.
And that membership list is from 2018. That's why you're.
I'm messing with you. I'm just messing with you. It's all good.
We haven't forgot about
It's
you.
all good. It's all good. I say I'm going to go on my lunch hour, and I don't get a lunch hour, so it's all good. Do you have anything else you want to add, Corey?
No.
Okay. Is there anybody else here that would like to speak that wasn't here last time that didn't get a chance to speak on the ordinance? Okay, one at a time, please. Tawny?
I still have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I get you to hold, Doug, can I get you to come to the podium? After Tawny, just come after Tawny. Come on, Tawny. We'll play musical chairs here.
Hi, my name's Tawny Stottlemyre. I'm the Executive Director of your Community Action Agency here in Topeka, and I do have some written comments that I want to share with you, but I'm not going to read those to you right now. They basically say that because our mission is to fight poverty in this community, part of what we do is give voice to the people who don't have a voice. And we stand, as your community action agency, behind the Homeless Task Force's recommendation that there is more work to be done here before we pass an ordinance that we then have to fill in the blanks for. We really believe that we would be better off, and the people that we serve at your community action agency who live in your community, whether they live in a house or whether they're living in a tent, would be better served if we filled in those blanks before we pass something that becomes policy and requires following when we don't have all that information. I do want to address, Councilman, your questions about best practices and what we know as a group of professionals working on this issue. We know that affordable, supportive housing works. We've seen that in communities across the United States. We've seen that in our own community. Affordable, critically important, and we don't have enough of that. Supportive, very important. We have an incredible success rate at our Tanglewood facility with people who are severely, persistently homeless and dual diagnosed as severely and persistently mental ill. Their average length of stay at our facility where supportive services are provided on site is 4 years. And that's incredible when you think about a population that has been in the past persistently homeless. So we know that those things, along with good jobs and good wages, work to fight poverty and fight homelessness. I do want you to know that there is a subcommittee of the Homeless Task Force that has been formed to work on providing stronger case management for homeless individuals, because despite all of the services that are available, there is not a strong and cohesive availability of case management for folks that are homeless and those who are recently housed, who need assistance remaining housed. So we are working on some stronger solutions and some coordinated solutions within the community. And Councilwoman Clear, boy, if we had the silver bullet to end homelessness, we would have done it 20 years ago when the council was formed. But we know that working together and working with you as you create policy, that we can feed into what you're doing and that we're all working towards that same goal of helping this community be more prosperous. And the reason that we haven't addressed camping in the past, in my opinion, is because we don't have a rash of problems with individuals who are camping. We have homelessness problems, we have poverty problems, sometimes we have criminal problems in this community, but the reason this hasn't risen to the top of your homeless task force agenda is because we are not inundated with the issues of people who aren't breaking the law, who are staying outside of the traditional shelters. Sometimes there's really good reasons why that's happening. But it has risen to the top of our radar screen because we want to be a part of your solution and not left out of that. So I'm going to stop there because I know there are other people who have things to say, and thank you for hearing our input. I do appreciate that, and I'll pass these out, but I'll also be happy to answer questions if you have them of me.
Are there any questions for Tawny? Okay. Doug, would you come to the podium, please?
While Doug's coming up.
Thank you.
Madam
Thank you, Tony.
Chair, I want to make the distinction
For best practice.
that the camping that was brought to my attention are the people that camp and don't want help. And that's the people we're having an issue with. Yes, there's homeless people that we can help, and those may not be the problem campers, but it's the other group that this ordinance was really meant to target. Those that go, nope, I'm going to camp here, I'm going to litter, I'm going to do whatever I want, and you can't stop me. Police can't do anything. That's the group I wanted to target. And I know it all goes together, and I know we need to figure this out. And Doug, this is just from my understanding. Don't take this as a negative, but when the city passes an ordinance like this, how deep, if you consider the task force recommendations on all the questions and all the problems we need to figure out, how deep is that responsibility of the cities? So if we have an ordinance, we go, here, we're going to pass this. Does the city then have to sit down and figure out everything, or how has that been done in the past? Do you understand my question?
Councilwoman Chair Doug Gerber, Deputy City Manager. To the extent I think I understand your question, I think it is an appropriate role for the city to have an involvement in this from a lot of perspectives. It's fashionable now and should be to talk about sense of place and sense of community. I think it's your role as policymakers to help create policies that do that for our city. I think from a very practical perspective, it impacts many of our departments, whether we're talking about, the police officer sitting behind me, Chief Bauer and his crew, Sasha Hahn and her department. It impacts a lot of our departments in a very real and practical way every day. And so I think our participation in this conversation, in the policy development, and in the implementation thereof is absolutely critical. We need the input from these folks because they have the view from the ground level, and they can help us find practical and reasonable solutions. So I absolutely think we need to be a participant, maybe even the driving participant, but it should be a partnership. And it appears to me, I'm sort of stepping into this today, but it appears to me that we have the right players at the table to help implement an effective partnership.
So how deep do we go? Do we go down to every, the 100 things that need to be done before we implement something? Or can you get to a point that says, okay, this is what we're going to do? We don't have to worry about every single situation that might come up.
As a practical matter, I think, I'll give you a general answer like I love to do, but as a practical matter, I don't think we can consider every single potential ramification of an ordinance before it gets passed, because we'd never pass anything. There's always going to be a potential downside to what you do as policymakers and what we do as policy implementers. But I think if we can think through the basic ones and try to come up with reasonable approaches and solutions, and understand that whatever we do, there may be some risk to it. There's always a risk we might have a lawsuit. Okay, if we can mitigate that risk to the extent that we're all comfortable with it, then I think, in my opinion, I think you would want to proceed with that.
Okay.
Because we can't mitigate every risk. It's a risky world, and we can't try to pretend otherwise.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair. Thank you, Doug. I just kind of want to follow up on that. That's one of the things that I've seen over some time as a private citizen and as a former city employee is the desire to do good and to address an issue, but set ordinance in place that really kind of is difficult to enact. And so it's an ordinance on the books, but in practical life application doesn't seem to really go anywhere. I know this is unrelated, but as an example, I feel personally the ordinance that we have in place with regards to loud music coming from cars is just a waste of time. I mean, because you can go anywhere, everywhere, and not go anywhere and be in your home and hear the loud music coming from cars. And I would be surprised if there are any tickets being written for that. So why have it on the books? So I bring that up because I want this to mean something and make sure that in fact it accomplishes at least some of our goals, maybe not everything. I'm just reluctant to put anything to place that will tie not only law enforcement, but all the other organizations that have some part in helping to do this, tie them to a point where, okay, now we passed it, you guys got to get this done. And not give them the assistance, resources, or backing to make that happen. So that's why I bring that up. I appreciate your answer on that, because there are going to be some risks. There are going to be some unintended consequences. It happens with everything. But I appreciate your general answer because of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Absolutely, we want to make it specific enough that it works and that it has some teeth, but we don't want to make it so specific, in my opinion, that then a little piece of it doesn't work and we have to pass another ordinance and another one. We've all seen that implemented as well. So it appears we're on the right track with it.
Thank you, Doug. One of the things that, to me, is that everybody's watching to see how we're going to handle this, and also how we're going to handle the, Sarah, did you want to talk? Okay, come on up to the podium while I'm talking here. And how we're going to handle the underserved, and people are looking at that, and we want a good team, a good fit, because at the end of the day, what I think what the task force wants is to help those that they can help, to get them off the street and to get them where they need to be. And sometimes it's just that right person that can say that. So I agree, we need all the partners that we can get. Can you state your name?
Sure. My name is Jimena Garcia. I'm a physician and a citizen of Topeka. Can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm going to start my remarks with a quote from John F. Kennedy. If a free society cannot help the many who are poor, it cannot save the few who are rich. I think, like you just said, we're at a decision point today. What kind of community do we want to be? We all want for Topeka to be a thriving community. We call this a great place with Midwestern values. We say this is a good place to raise a family. Is the ordinance you're considering today with what we've got in place in line with our Midwestern values? I ask each of the members of the City Council present here today to step back and see what it is you are trying to accomplish. Will making camping illegal in public places be for the good of everyone in our community? Is its purpose to make sure the most vulnerable citizens are protected, or is it to hide the ugly problems of the poorest citizens in our community? As elected officials, your duty is to all your constituents. The homeless are God's children too. You want us to vote to renew the increased sales tax for the next 10 years to improve the existing roads in Topeka. This increased tax impacts all of us. It impacts the homeless and the poor disproportionately. How can we as a community, including the homeless, be asked to pay more in sales tax to fix our roads and then criminalize public camping and say we don't have resources to do the right thing and actually take care of the homeless in our community? We should be looking for research-based practices like we heard about today about how to actually help the homeless in our community instead of passing ordinances to push them further into the shadows of society. I'm strongly against this ordinance, and I will vote against renewing the sales tax if this is passed. And I have a copy of my remarks.
Okay. Councilwoman Claire.
I understand everything that you've said. However, there are people that have businesses in the city that are getting hurt by this camping. And we also have to think about them. And I think we can do both. Help them and the police. I mean, I've had a lot of officers tell me, gosh dang, I can't, my hands are tied, I can't do anything. And, you know, the cost of us going out and cleaning up a campsite, the health issues of the campers themselves. So I hear you, but I think there's both sides.
Sure, everybody, they're all constituents, but I feel like I'm here because I feel like the homeless are who need looking out for, and I don't think they're the people calling you about cleaning up the streets.
No, but the businesses are,
right.
Businesses need to be looked out for too.
Right, but what kind of community do we want to be? We want to be all about business, or do we want to be?
I said there's a middle.
Right, no, I'm just telling you that's what I feel.
And I think there's a middle that you can do both, and we don't have to do one or the other.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Oh, did you have a question?
Well, go ahead and let him. I was going to ask city attorney.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Luther or city attorney, Lisa, we've talked about private property and public property. Something came up last time after this. Somebody was asking me, you know, I think there was an example put up on the screen. It might have been by Reverend Feaker, of this gentleman who had 5 tents over on their property and nothing that we could do about it or anything like that. If it's on public property or the right-of-way, can we not enforce a trespass or an ordinance in that case? Because that's also, I think, if you're that close to a roadway or something like that, there's a safety issue there involved as well. Is that separate from what this ordinance is seeking to do? But I mean, why can't we take action on those situations where they are on city property and are trespassing, basically, by putting a campsite up?
The difficulty with trying to handle that situation as a trespassing concern is because that is public property and it's open to anybody. And if the government were to come in and tell him that he can no longer access this property, we've got the civil rights problem that has been mentioned. Why would we be running him off of property that is available and open to anybody?
I think the trespass option is open more so to removing folks from private property, unless they can provide some kind of paperwork or some letters of consent from the property owner. But as far as public property is involved, I would imagine you can't do anything with them unless there's some kind of public health, safety, welfare issue that's involved where you really need to remove them from the property in order to protect the public.
Okay, that was a question that was asked of me, and I think I knew the answer, but I wanted to hear it from you. Thank you.
Okay. At this time, yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Steve Scheffelbein. I'm with the Topeka Justice Unity Ministry Project. We have some special interest in housing for low-income families, and so homelessness camping is very related to that, as you've heard, and you're well aware of that. So we advocate for solutions that help households avoid homelessness, camping. But once they get there, it's easy for one thing to pile up on another, and there you got the situations that we have. So I guess for the public record, it would be good for you, I was a suggestion, that clearly states your intent for why you're considering this ordinance. I've heard some things from Councilperson Clear as to what the intent was. And the information would be what extent, how serious of an issue is it for business owners and things of that nature, to help give us some idea what the nature of it is. I think you've talked with the idea of the private-public partnerships that are represented here in this room. They're getting some public monies, quite a bit of private monies as well. I'm encouraged, quite frankly, if the city is really considering to do something more in partnership with the private sector on addressing homelessness through this ordinance. That's really kind of exciting, because some of those things in Albuquerque make a lot of sense. And maybe there's more discussion that needs to happen between public-private issues to see how we can redirect resources, or what additional resources, obviously, would be helpful. But to pass an ordinance that says, you should have these other things in place without any criteria as to whether or not those services are in place, it's like, why pass an ordinance when you know the services aren't there? When you got the services in place, okay. Whatever it is, though, that keeps the city interested in addressing these issues is great, okay? Because, we like to see that happen as well. And would you really think about practicality? As a police officer, going to be the best type of individual to encourage someone to get services? I don't know. Maybe for that person who just doesn't want to consider anything, the 80 times that you have to approach them. We got personal freedom involved here, and you know that as well. So we would just ask that the governing body, avoid, in the last resort, that last thing, the enforcement part, where you criminalize personal choice, regardless of whether it's their fault or other conditions that have created that. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. I was reading in our minutes, City Attorney Robertson, I asked you to check with the state, the Kansas Department of Wildlife, to see if they were doing, or it was said that they were going to do something regarding permits along the river. Yeah. Do you have anything to report back to us?
Yes, I emailed the committee members, or actually I sent the information to Liz, and she provided it on Monday, I believe.
Okay.
I provided a 2-page overview of the contacts that I made. I've talked to folks with the state, with the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks and Tourism, park planner with the Shawnee County Parks, folks with the Corps of Engineers, and basically they do not have any permit process that's in place, and they have not been talking about putting any type of permit process in place. Folks can camp anywhere between the high water marks without a permit. It's a navigable stream, and so they're allowed to do that if they wish without a permit.
Okay, so that's just something we heard that wasn't really kind of out there. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak? I would like to say, I speak a lot with the firefighters and they talk about how they have to respond to calls, and also different areas that they come across, camping and homeless and their services. So it does. I think you're correct, Doug. I think it does affect everybody all the way around the city. I would like to propose, because this is not, I'm just gonna say this right now. I too, Sandra, have heard the business owners, and I did hear that there is something that the business owners could do. Am I correct? If they're on their property, they can sign a statement or a bill or a ticket.
A complaint.
Yeah, there we
Yes.
go.
Yes.
I'm brain dead now, I'm sorry. They can sign a complaint against that person right now, right? I guess, because I thought I heard that after our last meeting, and I had a couple people call. I would like to see us, I mean, this is a great partnership with all the people that are listed on here, and I would like to see us form some type of committee that we can kind of sit down and talk. And anybody that wants to be in that committee can get a hold of Liz in the council office, 368-1671. And I think we need to have, I would like to see us have another meeting so we can brainstorm some more. To the task force, I know that you're aware, but I will put this on the record. We are also concerned about the residents that are under the bridge, as well as I know the mission is. I know the mission's been over there, but what we can do to get the task force out there. Corey, I'm going to ask for you to help me lead this charge, if you don't mind, because I know that you go to all the meetings, and you see I'm not on the list, so that's all right. There's a lot of lists I'm not on. So if you could help me do that. To the legal team, I don't know if you have anything else that you want to bring to the table that would help. I appreciate the film today. I think that's an eye-opener to say we all, I mean, you know, just hearing you say, Luther, let's talk to him. You know, you'd be surprised if you just talk to them, because I do. I ride by and I'm so upset with them. And you're right. Maybe we should just stop and talk and see what they need. But I would like to see us put a force together. So I'm going to look for you to go to the chief. I hope go to the police chief, because we have to have that homeless outreach unit in place, correct? So I'll look for you to report back at our next meeting with that. Frank, Mr. Henderson, I'm going to look at this, your proposal. We thank you for that. But if there's anything else you want to add to our next meeting, I look forward to seeing that after you've heard what you've heard. Corey, I look for you to get with the task force president and come back and brainstorm. Now, I heard her say that, and I apologize, what was who? Carrie. I heard her say that you guys were talking about putting a subcommittee together. Is it together, or you need to put one together? It's together. It's together? Is that who's going to help on this, that subcommittee, or do you need to put another committee? Well, you figure it out and then get back with us, okay?
Madam Chair.
Just a second, sir.
Okay.
Ms. Garcia, if you'd like to be a part of this committee, can you get with the lady with the baby back there? Just get with the baby and give her your information so we have that if you haven't signed the key. Okay? Tawny, I know you'll be at the table. Am I missing anybody? Carrie, okay. Corey, I would like, out of that task force, we have one shelter that said, and what did you call it, a wet shelter or a?
Wet shelter.
A wet shelter, okay. Well, I don't like that, wet shelter. Caring shelter, that's what we're gonna call.
Sobering beds.
Huh?
Sometimes they call them sobering beds.
I don't even like that. I don't even like that. I like caring shelter, but you know what I'm talking about? We have one place that's committed to us, and that's the mission. But they do have guidelines, and I respect that, because there's children over there. I would like you to come back with how many shelters, get with the task force, that they can provide caring shelters. So, because we have to have that in place, correct, legal? We have to have a place to take them.
Otherwise, there's no place for us to take them.
Otherwise, there's no place for us to take them. And remember, it doesn't have an 8 to 5. It doesn't have a Monday through Friday, okay? So if we can see how many would commit to that, we would need to know that. The shelter, homeless outreach. Where are we going to be at on the education part? Because these are the 3 things I heard we have to do: educate, encourage, and enforce. Okay? We don't really want to get to the 3rd one. But educate is number 1. That's at the top of our list. And that means to educate the task force, or does that mean to educate
I had to watch this video a couple of times to pick up on this, but it's tied to the concern with funding some of these programs, because what you're doing is you're educating the public I guess in the context of panhandling, how to make best use of your donation. Is it handing the $5 bill out of the window of the car directly to the person?
Okay.
Or is it things like installing signs and maybe having a phone app, making it as easy as possible for people to donate more efficiently, and then that goes into supporting your programs?
Okay.
There's also an education piece about working with businesses and stuff like that are affected by this, seeing if they're willing to help contribute donations to it.
Okay, well, I will find out I'm gonna start breaking these out, and I'll find out who will head that up. But until I do, Doug, if you will get the finance team, if you will get with the finance team to see if we can have in the city, our bank, an account for that. If we can get something set up. So once we start educating, that we can have that people with our partners, once we start educating that we're gonna need funding, that money can go directly there for that. Now, I'm saying that, but if we can't do that, I wanna know what we can do, okay? So if you can get with finance and have somebody and then give me that name, that would be great. Or just give it to Liz, okay? So we're gonna educate, we're doing the finance part of that. Is there any piece that I'm missing? Yes.
Madam Chair, I was going to ask you, the gentleman talked about the affordable housing aspect of addressing the issue, and if you would include somebody who can give us a good idea of, when they say affordable housing, what do they specifically mean? What would be the housing that we would try to find or have in place or make available, at least on a temporary basis, to address that issue that they brought up in talking with the homeless group?
Okay. Okay, well, and I'll write that down.
Okay.
And that's a good thing, because I have that down. But what we'll do is, Corey, can you do a chart for me of everything I just said? Okay. And get with Liz and she can help you. Is there anything else legal that I am missing in this process?
I don't think so. One thing I'd like to mention, Chairperson, just with respect to the legality of it, I wanted Luther to kind of explain a little bit about what research went into it on the front end and what they based the ordinance on, just so everybody's maybe a little bit more comfortable with the fact that, we're not
just throwing it together.
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely true that a lot of cities have been involved in litigation over these types of ordinances, and a lot of these ordinances have been invalidated. We looked at those. I've read lawsuits by the ACLU, I've read settlements, I've read judgments, and what we looked at, though, in writing this ordinance is cities that corrected those ordinances or their ordinances were successful. A primary example that this ordinance is patterned after is the city of Sarasota, Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and the city of Miami. That's because they had a very significant landmark civil rights case come out of that, those attempts to criminalize that without any other services being offered. That was the Pottinger case that I talked about at the last committee meeting. That's where those protocols that settlement agreement out of that civil rights case established is reflected in our ordinance. That's those protocols out of that Pottinger settlement are saying things like you have to offer them a shelter for the night or you can't enforce the ordinance.
Right.
If they're in need of medical or social services, you can't enforce the ordinance. You have to safeguard their property if it is impounded by the police and allow them an opportunity to reclaim it. Those are the pieces of an ordinance that have to be there under the settlement agreement in order for it to be legal and constitutional. That's what we looked at, and that's what we've built into this.
And I do appreciate that. Can you, I think you talked about, I'm sorry, Lieutenant? Sergeant Klain. You talked about the storage part of it last time at our first meeting. Can you follow up with that on the next meeting with me?
As what that would look like?
What it would look like, what it would entail, how much storage, and we talked about bins. So when we come back, we can kind of go over that again. I think that would be a part of your, could you do that for me, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And I think, Luther, that's why I think we need to partner, because where'd Corey go? Corey, God, Corey, you're gonna be upset with me. Who are we gonna take them to medically? Where are we gonna go? So think about medically, if they have a drug addiction or drug or alcohol addiction or a mental, so who's, because we're gonna need somebody 24/7, right?
Yes.
What partner is gonna step up and say, we'll be available, if we can bring them, or, because that's what I believe I'm hearing you say. Is that correct? And I think once we start doing that, and I think once we get committees in place, and once we have all these people, I think people are gonna be happy to see us partner, that know that even though we're passing this, we're going to lengths to try to figure out the issue, because there's issues, whether they're homeless, whether they're mentally ill, whether they're physically ill, or, that we're doing everything that we can before we hit that last step. Did you have something that you wanted to say?
No, thank you.
Karen, Sandra?
Did you, what's the task force committee going to do?
I've asked the task force committee to come together. They're going to come back to me. I've asked Corey to go back to them, because they have a long list, and any other partners that's out there that want to see who is willing to do what. Like, for instance,
The medical and
the medical.
Okay.
We got Vallejo on boards here. We got Stormont Vale. We got Washburn Tech. Because it could be, medical could be something as big or small as, if we had Washburn Tech, it could be somebody that, because we got people going in diabetic comas. You know what I'm saying? That are homeless because they haven't had their medicine. I don't know if the health department's on here, Corey? If they're in here?
I'm not sure if they've been attending here.
They're not on the task force?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I would like to see if they would be a partner with us, because we've got people that have gone in diabetic comas, and if we can't, or where are we gonna take them when we find them? If you see somebody, are we taking them to the emergency? I wanna know where we're gonna do, how they're gonna get help. And so that's why I asked her to get, her and the other lady, Carrie, to get with them to see what agencies are gonna step up and say, I will. Okay? Anybody else? I hope everybody's good for the cause. I tell you what I'm gonna do, this is out of the norm for me, but Reverend, can you come up to the podium for me, Sarah? Sure. And close us out in prayer, because it seems like we're gonna need some prayer on this.
Thank you for the honor.
Said be also ready.
Spirit of life and love, we ask for your guidance, for your presence, by whatever names or no name at all that we may call you. Help us to guide our vision, to consider our actions, to reflect on the consequences, and to move with a sense of responsibility to each other, that we are each other's keeper. Remind us of the humility with which you would guide us. Blessed be. Amen.
Okay, is there anything else to come before? Thank you, Reverend Sarah. Is there anything else to come? I'm going to try to schedule our next meeting within next month. Will that give everybody time? Okay. Will that give the task force time? If not, Corey, I'll email you. Okay, if nothing else, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
Did you recognize